Commission on Monday, June the 18th, 2012. As we start each meeting, we usually start with a Pledge of Allegiance. I don't see a flag, so I guess we will skip that for today, and I'm going to give you your notice pursuant to the provisions of Section 2-68-030 of the Metropolitan Code of Law. Notice is given that if you are not satisfied with the decision made by the Metropolitan Transportation Licensing Commission, you can appeal that decision by petitioning for a writ of certiorari with the Davidson County Chancery or Circuit Court. Your appeal must be filed within 60 days of the date of entry of the Metropolitan Transportation Licensing Commission's decision. We advise you to seek your own independent legal advice to ensure that your appeal is filed in a timely manner and that all procedural requirements have been met. And we welcome today Channel 30. For those who are insomniacs and need something to put them to sleep, they can watch our commission notes. Channel 3, not 30, sorry, Channel 3. And we're happy to have them here and recording our meetings now and in the future, whatever they want to do. Obviously, we're very open to the public knowing and understanding what we do. Today is also the last, meeting for our prior counsel, Jenny Howard from Metro Legal, and we're happy to have had her service. But we're also happy to have Teresa Costonis taking over for her. They've both been involved in guiding the commission, and so we thank you, Jenny, for your service. And Teresa, I don't know if you won the booby prize in the office, but we're yours now. We have two matters on the agenda. The first is the consideration of action to be taken in response to the Human Resources investigation into alleged misconduct by, by the investigators. Though was there also a report on Mr. McQuiston? Okay, so it's three employees of our four employees. Okay, so the three investigators and the director. And my understanding about this is, first of all, that our employees of this commission, and I'm speaking for the commissioners, are civil service employees. And so there are requirements when there have been accusations, and we've all, as commissioners, had a chance to read the investigation that was conducted by Rita Turner and the Department of Human Resources for Metro of what they view were any violations. So my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, counsel, is that we need to actually give the employees what's called a charge letter because they're civil service, laying out what the charges are against them.
That's correct.
Okay. And then our choices are that we can, and we can delegate someone to do the charges, or we ourselves as commissioners can put together the charges. So we can do that today. And we need to make a decision on how we're going to bring whatever charges are necessary against the employees. And then we have, do we have an option, or does that have to go back to Human Resources Council?
You have an option, certainly. The next phase would be a departmental hearing or meeting with the employee. And you can either hear that yourselves as a commission, or you can delegate it back to the HR department to appoint a hearing panel.
And if the HR department appoints a hearing panel, who are the types of people who hears this if it goes back to HR?
Well, I don't mean to speak for HR, but my assumption would be it's always difficult when you have a really small department like this and you don't have sort of internal resources to draw upon to put together a hearing panel.
Yeah.
And so in like a larger department, that's not a problem. The larger department, different departments do it a little bit differently, but I think you could have like section managers from other divisions or something like that come in and be on your panel to hear an employee disciplinary matter. So they might just do that with other Metro departments, for example, draw from other Metro departments, perhaps ones that kind of might deal with some of the same types of duties or responsibilities in other contexts, and so might have kind of relevant managerial authority knowledge.
Can they not also designate one member of the commission to act on behalf of the commission?
With regard to preparing the charges letter, I would recommend that route.
Okay. So, Commissioners, and I know I've been looking at this and studying how to best present it to you of what our options are, and this is somewhat new to each of you. So, do you have any additional questions of our counsel, or what, does anyone want to discuss what you think would be the best situation here, given these options that we have?
If I'm understanding correctly, we have one of two options. Us as commissioners delegate whatever action there is, or we pass it off to human resources through the city. Is that correct? Or am I-
Well, it's really, my understanding is we have a two-phase process. The first phase is under civil service, we're required to bring some type of charge
Okay.
against the employees. And I don't think we can we delegate that to human resources?
I would recommend against doing it, although both HR and myself would be glad to assist with the preparation of the charges letter. But I would think that the appropriate signatory to that letter would be the appointing authority, and under 2100, the commission itself is the appointing authority. So my suggestion would be maybe that the commission could, for example, delegate to the chair the signing of the letter and the kind of final review and approval of the charges letter prepared with advice of HR and counsel.
One of the things that we could do is if you all wanted to delegate to Ms. Costonis and I the drafting of a charge letter, we have a meeting next week. So we could actually bring a proposed letter to the
Sure.
meeting next week, and just have us approve it then.
As long as it's on the agenda and noticed in advance,
Okay.
then then y'all could vote on and approve the draft letter, or you could vote on it now and just.
Well, we could vote on the process now, and then we could
Either or both.
formalize or approve the actual letter next week. Is that?
As long as it's noticed on the agenda
Right.
that you're going to do that.
How many days notice do you need for the agenda?
I mean, y'all have internal policies
Yeah.
about when your agenda is supposed to be prepared.
Well, but you can add anything.
We're 10
That's
days out of the
10.
meeting.
If you're
Yeah, but
10
you can-
days
you can
out,
add it.
I think you're okay. There's time to add it. Under open meetings, there's no like bright line rule that says a particular number of days. It just says adequate notice in the state statute. But in general, certainly 10 days or even 7 days, I would say, is ample
Okay.
for that purpose.
All right. So let's deal first with the first part of this, which is the charge letter. Does anyone want to make a motion on how we should proceed on the charge letter?
I make a motion that the chair and council work on that letter for our next meeting, which I believe is the 28th. Is that not correct?
That's correct.
Yes.
Is there a
I second that motion.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, and that's unanimous, and that's what we will do. And Mr. McQuiston, if you will add that to the next agenda for the next meeting as well. Then the next issue that we need to decide is, once we have brought the formal charges, do we as the commission want to investigate and make the recommendations as to what happens to our employees, or do we want to delegate that back to civil service? And I think we ought to have some discussion on that issue. I think it's very difficult to have the hearing amongst ourselves where we've got to keep working with our inspectors and our director. So I'm somewhat inclined to send it back to HR, because the other issue is I don't really know or understand civil service procedures very well. I'm not an expert on those. Now, our counsel hopefully would help guide us if we decided to keep it in-house. But those are the pros and cons I'm kind of weighing in my mind. On the other hand, if we had it ourselves and had a public meeting, it would allow people to speak, I guess, on behalf of our employees or against our employees, which they may or may not get at civil service. Is that correct?
I think that the employees would have the ability to, bring witnesses
Okay.
and even have counsel present at the meeting with either this commission or any delegated hearing panel. And ultimately, that hearing panel, if that process is used, would just make a recommendation back to the appointing authority. And
Okay.
then whatever that recommendation is, the commission would have a chance to vote on it as well.
So we would have the final say, so
Yes,
that's what you're telling me.
exactly.
Okay. Well, that sounds pretty reasonable to me. But any other questions that you all have? Anything else we need to discuss? All right, do I have a motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion that we delegate to the Civil Service Human Resources Office the duty of investigating once the charge letter is completed and then making a recommendation back to the Transportation Licensing Commission.
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Yes.
Could I ask for a little bit of a clarification there? The step in the civil service process is actually to hold what's called a departmental hearing or meeting. It's basically the chance for the employees to come and kind of present their side of the case in response to the charges letter. I assume that's what you're talking about, but
That's
I thought
what he
that
meant.
clarification
Yes,
was-
Yeah.
that's what I mean.
Okay, great. Now, we are on our second issue on the agenda then today. We've dealt with the first, is that correct, Council? We got it all? All right. Now, our next issue is consideration of enforcement policy options. And my understanding is that we have 6 statutes that we enforce in this commission and some regulations and rules that we have in these notebooks. And so what we need to decide as a commission is how we want our employees, the inspectors, to proceed or to be able to carry out that enforcement. And I think that there's really 4 distinct issues in my mind, and if you all have any other issues based on, we've all had the same information coming at us. One of the issues is the badges. Second issue is whether or not they carry guns. The third issue is whether or not they're going to use lights. And the fourth issue is really their job description. Because if their job description requires them to do certain things, that may impact badges, guns, and lights. So we've got to, as a commission, make some policy decisions of, do we want to rely more on the police department to do enforcement? Do we want our inspectors to be able to do a certain level of enforcement? How are we going to function in the future? And, yes, sir.
If I could kind of give a little background to the commissioners, until 2006, we did not issue citations. Our enforcement was reacting to consumer complaints, unless it was just verbally telling somebody to do something and they might have done it or they might not have. But as far as actually conducting traffic stops, issuing citations, those things which would compel unlicensed operators to get a license, we did not have the traffic stop citation process in place then, and as a result, we probably had half the number of wrecker companies licensed as are licensed now. It was a bad problem with companies even coming in to get a license. If you don't enforce it, they won't come in and get one. Why would they? So it's imperative to us, in order to make licensure effective, that we also be able to issue citations to unlicensed operators. These are not addresses, these are vehicles. They've got to be stopped. State law prohibits us from using blue lights. We did not know that until actually Fleet told us that when they removed our blue lights from our vehicles in 2009, I believe, end of 2009. So blue lights are not an option. What we've been doing since then is using white lights, and in general, vehicles, pull over for white lights, and there's nothing illegal about that. The job description says make arrests. That job description was produced, I'm assuming, back in the 1990s. I don't know, but long before any of us. And yet, we really don't have that authority. We've not exercised the authority to arrest persons. We have conducted traffic stops on vehicles that we regulate, or the types of vehicles we regulate, and issued citations where appropriate, or checked their paperwork, that sort of thing, or told them they needed to get vehicles fixed. So, in terms of arrests in the job description, that does need to go away. The question of guns demands some legal review of past decisions in Metro government. And I'm not talking about decisions within our commission. I'm talking about Metro government that issued those weapons in the first place and that allowed inspectors to operate with them even after special police commissions were no longer given. And were able to do that up until the day that we turned them in voluntarily. And my understanding is that there was permission granted because of some state law change that allowed handgun carry permits to suffice instead of special police commissions. And I'd ask the legal department to check that. And then in terms of badges are, for the most part for us, they're a non-issue. We had them because we were issued them. If we don't have them, we can still do the things we've been doing without a badge, as long as the job description does not preclude us from doing so. But there are very, 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 very few citations given to operators in any of the ordinances that we regulate that go to environmental court, which is where all of our violations of our ordinance go, which means the police are not issuing very many citations. They are not enforcing our ordinances. Our 3 inspectors are, and that's all. So however this works out, if the inspectors are not allowed to do traffic stops by virtue of being concerned that their life may be in jeopardy in the middle of the night when they pull somebody over, and I believe our commission meeting minutes and other documents we have will reflect that that is a danger to inspectors, then I think the commission should not expect that inspectors would be willing to stop somebody in the middle of the night for a potential violation. And since most of our enforcement currently is after dark, when taxis, limousines, and illegal wreckers may be out and about, that will hinder us. So it's more than just a let's make a quick decision. It's a real dilemma that we have as enforcement to be able to make sure that the people we regulate actually do what they're supposed to do. I'd just like you to consider that before making quick decisions that might result in the police being the only ones who really can enforce.
I have a question. When you're saying enforce, are we talking about carrying a weapon? Is that what you're talking about? Is
No,
that
I'm talking about any action given.
just being able to enforce?
Any action by an inspector
Okay.
to stop someone, check their paperwork, see if they've got a license, see if they're overloading with a cab, whatever that may be. That would be an enforcement step. Just see if people are in
Correct.
compliance with our laws.
Right, and what would be the reason we wouldn't want our inspectors to do that?
I think that's something we can discuss. I mean, it would be harder to carry out. What our inspectors, I guess, could do is say, I think there's a unlicensed wrecker or an unlicensed taxi operating here, and call the police and say, police, you go arrest them. I think 9 times out of 10, the police are probably going to be otherwise occupied, and that's the problem that we have. But again, that's an option that we have. I'm concerned, I need to ask legal counsel this, on the handgun carry permit, wasn't that a problem? It was not sufficient?
The inspectors are civil service employees, and as such, they are subject to the rules and policies of the Civil Service Commission as well as this commission. And there is a civil service policy that HR brought to our attention that does specifically prescribe the circumstances in which metropolitan government civil service employees who are not MNPD employees can carry weapons.
And what it says is that we can't carry them in their vehicles. They can't carry them in this building. So essentially, I've directed them not to carry them. But that.
Even with their private license to carry?
Right. They can carry like any other citizen can, but it's not, they cannot do so in their role as an inspector.
Right, but if we put in their job description that as part of their job with Metro and with this commission that they're required to carry a gun, then that takes care of the problem? Is
I
that
think it would
correct?
also require
Two or
then
three
the
other
Civil
things.
Service Commission to change the rule.
Okay, Mr. Quist,
I'm sorry.
let me
I'm sorry.
ask
No, who you-
counsel that.
You're this way.
Yes,
Okay.
sorry, you're both on the same side of the...
My recollection of that policy is that it has 2 or 3 requirements. Certainly, it would require a revision of the job descriptions, and that revision of the job descriptions, Civil Service Commission approves all Metro Civil Service job descriptions. So that would have to go before that commission, and the
Okay.
case would have to be made to them that it would be necessary for the inspectors to be required to carry firearms as a part of their job description. And in addition to that, there were several provisions about training that needed to be given. I want to say that the training had to be either by MNPD, the Sheriff's Department, or the Juvenile Court. And I think there was a third thing. Do you remember, Brian?
Okay, so we've got a few hoops to
Those are the big
go
ones.
through.
I think there was one more. Let me check.
It's in our,
But currently, they are not carrying.
currently they're not carrying.
And how long has that been going on?
Since the day that I found that they were not allowed to, sometime in April.
Have they reported any incidences where they would not stop someone because they were fearful?
Yes, they've not stopped anyone. They just have not been willing to stop in the night. They've done what they could during the day when there've been witnesses around, but that's all.
I remember the third thing. Also, the commission itself would have to adopt its own policies as to
The use of the guns?
yeah. This commission, I mean, not civil service.
All right, so back to our 4 issues. On the badges, do each of the employees have an ID, a Metro ID?
Yes, in January, when this, let me give you a little background. About a year ago, I requested of Corey Harkey, our previous legal advisor.
I don't think I need the whole
Okay.
history. I just
Well,
really want to
we
know
asked for
that they
some
have an
help in
ID.
terms of making sure that we were straight on our enforcement. Okay, I got the answer from Jenny in January that said that we could do these following things according to the law. That, under that statute, the state code and the charter, we're allowed
Pass along
to.
the peace officer.
Right, the peace officer, based on that, we
That's
created a credentials for our inspectors, which they now use in lieu of badges. Those are created in our own office.
Okay, but don't they also have a Metro employee badge?
Well, it's an identification that they're a Metro employee.
Okay.
But it doesn't, and it does not, of course, authorize them to do anything in terms of enforcement or inspection. It just says this is who I am.
It doesn't say I'm a transportation licensing inspector?
It probably says Transportation Licensing Commission Inspector.
Okay. That would seem to me to be sufficient. I don't know what else. What else have you created for them?
Well, we created some credentials with a picture signed off by me under the charter and this provision. We are authorized to do these things, or this individual is authorized to enforce our code. We had one stop during CMA of a taxi driver who refused to accept that as legitimate. And I think they rounded him up in another way.
And
Helpful employees.
to clarify, we sent the section of the code that talks about what peace officers can do and clarified for Brian that they are peace officers. We haven't had an opportunity to review. We're just kind of finding out now about the new badges or whatever's being described. So just to clarify, we haven't had a chance to, we didn't know
Okay.
about that until just now, and we haven't seen those yet, but we'd be happy to look at them.
Well, certainly having a photo ID is helpful. Do your Metro badges not have a photo ID?
Yes,
They
it
do.
does.
So why can't we just go with the Metro badge, Metro ID, instead of having a badge?
Well, I'm not sure we need a badge. What I'm saying is that the Metro ID in itself doesn't give them authority to do anything. They need something else that will say that this, by virtue of their position, this person has the authority to enforce the laws, and we've given them that. And legal gave it to us, we gave it to them. That's what they're using now. I'll show you later. We sent it to somebody to use, I'll show you later.
Yeah.
I know we've got the copies.
Would be an
Weren't
idea
we looking
to
into getting badges that
send
don't
out
say
memorandum
police
or-
on them?
We were, but if you look at the recommendations,
We got two people talking at the
I'm
same
sorry.
time. Mr. Hernandez was talking, so I'm sorry.
Would it be an idea just to send out a memorandum that says that if you see this, that person has the authority to stop you?
Yeah.
to whom would we send the memorandums? People already know them, that's one thing, but people who don't know them,
Right.
doesn't, I wouldn't
Everybody
know where to
that's
send it.
apply for a license.
No, but we're talking about illegal operators out there driving
Right.
a sedan or something.
Yeah. I see your problem. Commissioners, let's start at the top and work our way down. What do we do about the badge issue? Obviously, we're not gonna do badges that look like police officers anymore.
Well, back to, because Commissioner Marco was asking about the badge issues. Yes, we had requested a badge, then the HR department did their initial investigation, recommended that we have any badge design approved by legal, before we issued it, so we stopped that in progress, but we could do that. I'm not, it's really, as long as it said Transportation Licensing Commission and inspector or something of that nature, that, there's nothing that I know of in the code that would, or in the Civil Service Commission rules that would preclude us from doing that.
Well, my concern, I don't know, I'm talking too much, I'm happy to hear from the rest of y'all. Do you have a concern, as I do, that anytime we go back to a badge rather than an ID, we're making it look more like police officers, and that's the problem that we've created here, or we've had in the past?
From what I understand, the police department just didn't want the badge to say police. That the chief of police said, we don't want you to carry a badge that has the word police or Metro Police on it. So if you had inspector without the word police, but we just had TLC inspector, then they were okay with that, from what I understand. Am I correct?
Well, put words in the chief's mouth, that was his concern about police.
Okay.
Yeah, but if we put this insignia of Metro government or anything like that, then it starts to look like a police badge again, and I think, we don't want to confuse the public. We want to make sure that the public understands they're not being arrested, though it sounds like we've got in our job description the ability to make an arrest. I don't think I don't know if the police chief caught that part of it, and I'm sure he doesn't want us bringing people down to jail, so we might ought to think about that as well.
I think that there's also a safety component for the inspectors as well, and I guess that goes back to the initial question we have on the policy decision of, do we want our inspectors stopping taxi drivers and tow truck drivers and horse carriages or not, and the ability to carry a badge that clearly identifies them as a transportation licensing inspector would only aid that inspector in being able to immediately identify himself as someone of enforcement ability.
I agree with that.
Yeah. Well, I think it makes perfect sense that if we're going to enforce these ordinances, we've got to have some ability and teeth to do it. Our inspectors are trained and understand what we have to enforce because we're sort of a limited area. A police officer has a whole body of laws, and they're not necessarily going to know the specifics of what how old a cab's supposed to be, whether they're supposed to have applied for a license, all of the specifics that our inspectors would normally have. So I think, are we all in agreement that we want to keep enforcing? Do we need to make a motion that we want to continue this way, or?
Well, as far as on the enforcement side, I think the code sections governing the Transportation License Commission already provide that we can request that the Metro Police Department assist our inspectors, and I think that has probably been underutilized to date. Certainly, that is something that I think we should, as a commission, explore is how can we increase that as an enforcement tool in any kind of sticky situation for our inspectors to avoid, to perhaps avoid the use of carrying firearms, or if they are going to carry firearms, be very limited in their usage, and essentially setting up some policy recommendations or requirements as to when they must call Metro PD.
Well, it's hard, it's really hard, though, to set up criterion when you're not there at the activity or
Right.
that's part of why you just train your people well and have them have good experience. I know I've been on the commission, I guess I'm the longest serving one here for 5 years, and I've never heard of an issue about a gun in one of our inspectors, and they were carrying them the whole time. So I don't think it's caused any problems. I think it's probably more of a safety concern of we have it and hope we never need it, rather than we need it all the time. And I don't think our inspectors hesitate to call the police if they're in a jam that they think is beyond what they can handle, on any level. I mean, in the record business, a lot of times the police will be there because there'll been an accident. But on the taxi end,
I'd like to
little
make a
different.
motion
Okay.
that we allow our inspectors to enforce
okay.
the law. And let's just tackle that one portion
Yeah.
of it
Okay.
at a time.
That we continue enforcing.
That we continue to allow them to enforce.
All right, is there a second to that motion?
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, we're past that hurdle now. What kind of ID should they have? That's our next issue.
I make a motion that we allow the inspectors to carry badges that clearly identify them as Transportation Licensing Commission inspectors, and that obviously comply with whatever regulations there are for making sure the badges do not state any information or identifying them as affiliated with the police department.
I second that motion.
All right, all in favor of that motion?
Aye.
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 That motion carries. All right, now, next hard one, guns. I have a
Ready to start
license.
jumping through hoops.
Yeah. I have a license to carry.
So do I.
I'm okay with it. And I'm in a business that is somewhat concerning at times, and I'm happy to have it, and I've never used it. Though one of the lawyers in my office has had to pull it once. And so, you deal with a lot of people in the public. I don't know that I would want to pull someone over at night without a gun, but that's my personal opinion. Our inspectors obviously have felt the need because they've carried all these years. On the other hand, if we're going to do that, we've got some hoops to jump through. So we'll have to amend their job description to require it. We'll have to have them have appropriate training, and then we'll have to, I guess, have a separate meeting or a separate agenda item to discuss what policies we will have with regard to the use of guns at a future meeting. So, unless we want to try and tackle all of that today.
I believe I have a question along those lines.
Okay.
Let's say we allow the use of guns. Well, it would still have to go back to civil service. How does that how does it work? I mean,
They have to approve that change in the job description. They
Correct.
could say no. I mean, they could just
Correct.
tell us, sorry,
Correct.
we don't think it's justified. But I guess we'd have to have a separate meeting with them and let our inspectors make their case.
At one of the Civil Service Commission meetings, the proposed revisions to the job description would have to be presented to that commission.
Who would present that to the commission, the Civil Service Commission?
I don't know how it's usually done, either staff or the chair of this commission perhaps, or, any of y'all wanted to come, I think you all would be welcome.
Would it require the inspectors to be deputized?
I don't know that there's necessarily a process for that that's used currently.
The current civil service policy requires training.
Yes, that's correct. It requires training that the police department can provide, and it also can be provided according to the policy, I think, by the sheriff's department or by the juvenile court. But it has to be one of those three. It can't be just any training. So,
Do you want to talk about the revision of the job descriptions that has already gone on with HR?
No, because all we've done is what has happened with job descriptions to this point is back in January, same time frame with the legal opinion, we had just recruited and hired our third inspector, and at that point, right after that, I was advised by my HR liaison that the job description needed to be revised. So I looked at it with the recommendation she had given me, said, okay, I think we can change this, and then this whole issue of badges and whether they're doing the right thing and weren't doing the right thing came up, and I said, well, we're going to wait until we see how that comes out before we actually revise that. So there's, they've identified some things they thought should be changed, but obviously the commission can make those decisions through the appointing authority.
Brian, do we have a copy of the inspector's job description?
Yes, I can provide that for you.
Could we get it now?
I'm not sure that
We have
We have it?
packet.
It's in the package? Okay. Is it Exhibit
Yes, it
5?
is. It's the third to last page.
Exhibit 5?
It
Is that
didn't,
smart?
it did not, actually, Exhibit 4. There's several of them in here.
Okay.
Exhibit, I'm trying to figure out which is the most recent.
Exhibit 4.
4 and 5, okay.
Exhibit 3 and 4, I think may be the most current. Exhibit 5 was a recruiting announcement for the position, but I think Exhibits 3 and 4 are the current job descriptions for Inspector 1 level and Inspector 2 level. And these have been approved by the Civil Service Commission, so they're the official ones.
Go ahead and make a motion, let's prosecute violators.
Well, they might have to prosecute from the standpoint of they go to court.
Right.
So the prosecution's okay. I don't know that we want them arresting.
Yeah, we routinely prosecute violators. When I bring somebody before this commission, it's prosecuting. a
Right, but it says may make arrests and
That part
prosecute. We maybe need to
that part is
separate.
one that they think needs to be removed.
Okay.
They also believe that anything that's related to handguns should be removed, but I think that's a commission recommendation they need to hear from you, rather than HR unilaterally deciding what should be done.
Are there any other comments? Because I'd like to make a motion with regard to carrying of the firearms.
Ready?
I make a motion that we, as a commission, allow our inspectors to carry firearms, subject to the Civil Service Commission's approval and subject to ensuring that those inspectors obtain the appropriate licensing from either the police department, the sheriff department, or the juvenile court. And I also additionally would make that clear in the job description, that requirement.
I second that motion.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, that motion carries. Now, I think we may, to clean this up, need to make a motion to remove the may make arrest from the job description. And just clean that part up as well, if anyone is so inclined.
I make a motion that we remove that line, that inspectors may make arrests.
Okay. And it'll just read may prosecute violators.
Correct.
Okay.
Do we want to include something that they work in conjunction with police to make an arrest, or that they, no, nothing like that?
I mean, we've got one motion on.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, we can't have discussion.
Okay.
Once he's made the motion.
I second that motion.
All right.
Okay.
All in favor of the motion, if you understand. It's to take out the words make arrest.
Mhm.
Aye.
Aye.
All right, that motion carries. All right, now we've dealt with badges, guns, lights. You're telling us that we're still using lights, and there's not a problem with using lights.
We're
Is
only
that
using
correct?
white light. We're not allowed to use blue lights, which we don't have, so we're only using white lights.
And
And there's
I-
not a problem.
I think we might be safe, but I don't want to assume anything. In our first motion that we had on allowing enforcement, it seems that if they're going to enforce, that we've told them to enforce, that means they have the right to stop people. But do we want to clarify that? Yes, counsel.
I'm sorry, I'm just taking us back a little bit to the job description issue. Ms. Howard was pointing out that as long as we're kind of updating the job description, another point to update might be to add into the job objective section that another aspect of enforcement operations and so forth that they perform is the other passenger vehicles for hire.
Actually, there are a couple of those sort of update issues in there. We also have booting is in there. So
Yeah, that's right.
I had provided a number of those kind of wording changes to update the descriptions in terms of the regulations that we enforce, the industries we enforce, but
Why don't we do this?
Those aren't
Why don't we
substantive.
put on the agenda for our July meeting that you will give us updated job descriptions? And maybe just do a little bit of this cleaning up, but give us black-lined versions so we can see what you've changed.
this will be a draft for you to,
A draft to be approved or disapproved at the July 28 meeting. Okay? And let's make it for public comment as well, so we can have any input from the public, since we're not allowing that today.
and as a public hearing,
I think so.
sure.
Is that agreeable to the other commissioners?
I won't be here, but I would love to be a part of it, but I can't.
July
It's okay.
26th, actually.
It would be best.
All right, now,
I'm gonna do that as a motion.
well, I can't make motions, so if somebody else wants to make a motion, they can.
I'll attempt to make a motion. For our July meeting, please put on the agenda with the public hearing, the changes to the job description for the inspector. Did I do that right?
I second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Now, is there any other business that we need to attend to?
I interrupted you when you were talking about the lights.
Oh, yeah. It seems to me that we've already dealt with this part of it, but if anybody thinks we need more clarification,
Should we make a motion?
Well, before you make a motion, just one moment. Are white lights allowed?
Yes.
They are allowed.
They're not, unless
Okay,
this.
let's
I'm
let
sorry, maybe I
counsel
should let
answer.
the legal department answer.
Well, it's not absolutely 100% clear to me. I haven't actually seen the lights the way they have them. The state statutes have some very specific provisions about whether the lights, I can't remember, they show to the front of the
Forward
vehicle.
facing.
Yeah, whether they are, and I'm not quite sure exactly what y'all have and like how that meets the description. But I think that there is also a larger issue of kind of the teeth that the lights have, like whether you know, they have they don't have the kind of force or yeah, the ability to pull over that a police department has. So you know, you can have lights, but it's really just a question of if you want to give them some teeth and provide for some obligation on the part of the constituents against whom the enforcement action is being taken, then you might need to change your
Okay, I
rules
see
or
what you're
something like
saying.
that.
Okay, that makes sense. So what you're really saying is, would we be amending our regulations to say that people who are licensed by this commission, if they see a commission vehicle with lights, are required to pull over? Is that more along the lines of what you're talking about?
That is one option, absolutely.
Okay. And we haven't had that in our regulations previously. Okay.
I think whoever it is would be more likely to pull over if there were lights on the car, regardless of the color. If I saw white lights behind me and I was in a taxi cab, I would surely pull over.
Well, but we also have to remember there are unregulated people, especially times like we've just gone through with the CMA festival, that we have renegades coming to town.
I'm not sure if you're only going to put it into your rules that kind of address your already licensed and permitted people, then, you know, with the people who are truly completely bootleg, you know, that really might not help with them because they're already breaking the law, so that might be more of a police enforcement issue.
Yeah. And that might be one of the times the inspectors call the police and say,
Yeah.
I put my lights on, this car's not stopping.
And I mean, there's no question that they have the citation authority under Metro Code 124.030 to issue citations, and that there's ability to enforce an environmental court. I mean, that exists regardless.
Can they enforce can they write citations based on tag numbers? In other words, if they can't get somebody to pull over, but they can read the tag?
We don't have access to the database on who that vehicle belongs to. We're not the police department, so we don't get those records.
Can we request that the police department take your information and issue the citation on your behalf?
We always try.
Well, but you will have a record of how many times you've given it to them and how many times they haven't complied.
Makes
I
sense
guess
to
that's
me.
a question for both of us.
Well, this is a different kind of meeting, for sure. Our commissioners, what's your pleasure with regard to the light? It sounds like we do need to do some adjusting with that as well.
I'm not sure how we adjust it till we know what's allowed.
Okay, well, one of the things we could do is ask our legal counsel to provide us with what the guidelines are for lights and how we could properly structure our regulations to be within the law on that.
Sure. I mean, the option with the regulations that you all promulgate, we've sort of discussed. The other more drastic option, you know, might be even, and this would probably take additional efforts, and I don't really know how feasible it would be, but, you know, if there was specific state legislation that provided that this kind of public service provider could use some sort of light, that would, of course, be much more strong than anything else we've talked about.
Traffic safety is yellow, correct?
I think that's like the
Wreckers use those, emergency responders sometimes use it. They're almost always supposed to be facing to the rear for protection of the people in the vehicle. But it's generally, I'm not sure if the state law also prohibits those or not, but
I
not.
think amber lights are prescribed by state law for some sort of emergency. I forget what they're called exactly. The people who
Probably
show up when you have an
emergency
accident.
responders.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, I think makes the most sense, and maybe defer it at the end of July to give you enough time to do that. I don't think you can get it done by June, but if you want to, try.
Sure. I think it would help to kind of work with staff to see what they've got, and maybe even consult MNPD and see,
Okay.
what, with their law enforcement expertise, they would interpret that can and can't be done.
Okay. So do we want to make a motion for council to do that?
I would, but I'm not sure how to phrase it.
Well, I guess maybe investigate and report to us.
All right, I'd like to make a motion that council investigate and report back to the commission any findings on the appropriate color lights to use for enforcement.
Before it's seconded, would we want to do the appropriate lights and use? Because they may need to be in the rear or in the front, or we don't know exactly how to put them. So
Okay,
would that be all right?
that would be all right. Do you need me to go from
No, that's
the
good.
beginning? Because I can't remember.
I think we got it. Is there a second to that motion?
I second that motion.
All right, all in favor of the motion?
Aye.
All opposed? All right, now, is there any other business to come before our commission today?
Should we have a discussion about whether we should require our inspectors to obtain a police commission?
Those can't be given unless the police department so chooses to issue them, and I believe the chief is not going to do that.
But we could request it. Yeah.
Well, I'm assuming that in order to obtain a police commission, you have to undergo some type of training and pass that training before you would ever receive it. It wouldn't just be something handed to them to legitimize them, but and I don't know. I'm assuming though that there is some type of training. or
Yes, there was. In
course.
fact, Inspector Lawhorn had that, so he's gone through that before, although it may be changed since then.
I can see a benefit to them having a police commission, even though they would not be police officers in the sense of carrying a police badge. That police commission would give them additional training as well as have them more likely work in conjunction with the police department when necessary.
Well, I think you could make a motion to add that to the job description, that they have a special police commission, or I think you could make a motion for our legal counsel to look into what would be required, because I hate to put something in the description that we, may or may not be able to accomplish.
Right.
That's the other thing maybe needed to be fixed.
The other thing is, we do also have a deputy in Nashville, and we could have, maybe there's a way that they can be deputized. So if you want to go that route, if the commission wants to go that route, I think we might ought to study the two options, or what options are available to them.
I therefore make a motion that Metro Legal look into this issue for us as to whether or not the commission should require its inspectors to have either a police commission or be deputized by the sheriff's department, and what that would require, so that the commission can make a decision whether or not to add that to the job description.
It is actually already in the job description.
Did they have a
That
special police commission?
Yes. It says that is required upon the completion of the probationary period.
Wow.
And
Well-
the
well,
problem
then-
with that might be that if that's not obtainable, having that in the job description might be.
Okay. Well, let's Yeah, so you're finishing your motion.
Sorry.
Is there a second to that motion?
Let me withdraw my motion because I think I need to make a different motion first.
Okay.
I would make a motion that we remove from the job description that our inspectors obtain a police commission prior to completion of the probationary period. That obviously is apparently an outdated requirement of our inspectors currently.
That's second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, that motion carries.
And I make another motion that we request the Metro Legal Department provide us with information as to what is required in order to obtain a police commission or a deputy license for our inspectors, so that the commission can decide whether or not to include such a requirement for its inspectors going forward.
I second that motion.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And Ms. Costones, if you could get that to us enough in advance of the July meeting, if possible, that would be helpful to us to study ahead of time. All right, are there any other items that we need to housekeep with today, since we're cleaning things up? All right, then maybe it's time for my favorite motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Accomplished a lot today.